How's it going, everybody? My name's Release Radar, and a couple of weeks ago, I posted a video of how I found an Xbox basically in the garbage of my apartment complex, and I mentioned how I was going to try to flip it online for profit on Facebook Marketplace. Now, I also mentioned that I've made well over $100,000 on Facebook Marketplace, and I'm pretty experienced with the do's and don'ts of how to buy and sell stuff on there. So that's what we're going to be talking about in this video. I'm going to be explaining the do's and don'ts of buying and selling on Facebook Marketplace, eBay, or whatever else you might want to use. So let's get into it. Before we get into the rest of the video, I want to let you guys know that I started a podcast with some friends called Joystick Junkies that's basically all about gaming. If you want to check us out, we're on Spotify and also here on YouTube. I'll have a link in the description and also on my featured channel section. So I did mention at the beginning of the video that I've made well over $100,000 selling stuff on Facebook Marketplace, and while that is technically true, I personally didn't get to pocket all of that money. So allow me to explain. The bulk of the revenue came from a family friend who had a situation come up in their personal life where they had to sell their home recording studio. Now, their home recording studio was valued well over $100,000, but I ended up generating $88,000 because when you sell stuff used, you can't sell it for as much as it goes for new, right? And so I sold it for $88,000. I got to keep personally 10% of that, and they got to keep the bulk of the money because they needed it to deal with the situation that they were going through. And then I also helped my grandparents sell their car, or one of their cars. They have two, now they only have one, for $8,000. And then I've also sold just a various amount of other tech stuff, like my old streaming PC for $900 just a couple of weeks ago. And it all basically equates to over $100,000 that I've generated on Facebook Marketplace. And so before we talk about buying, I do want to talk about selling first, because I'm a little less experienced in buying stuff used, but I have sold too many items to count. So we're going to go ahead and talk about the do's and don'ts of specifically selling stuff on Facebook Marketplace, eBay, Craigslist. This can be applied to wherever you would be selling used gear. So let's just go ahead and jump into this. So when you sell stuff used, the first thing you want to do is look up the average cost of what it goes for used. And that might sound obvious, but I see a lot of people who sell their RTX 2080 Supers for only $100 below what they personally paid for it at MSRP. But what you guys have to understand is when you sell something used, the value plummets significantly, whether or not it was heavily used or not. So when you sell something used, you're going to want to try to look up the average market price of that item used in your area on Facebook Marketplace, or just specifically used online if you're using eBay. Now, prices might vary between your personal area on Facebook Marketplace and then like the entire country or the entire world on eBay. So you do want to try to be competitive. Because let's say you're selling a RTX 2060 used, and let's say it's an RTX 2060 from EVGA, and the average used cost of that is, I don't know, $200. Now, you want to sell it for $280. So you list it for $280, and then it just sits there up on eBay for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, and it just never sells because it's not priced competitively. Because as a buyer on the used market, why would you buy the more expensive one when you can buy one that's $80 less and still get the same product, right? So you have to understand that it doesn't matter what you want to sell it for. What matters is what it does sell for. And I see a lot of people make that mistake when they're selling stuff used on Facebook Marketplace and eBay and Craigslist. They want to sell it for what they think it's worth, and they don't take the time to do the research and list it way too high. And you also want to be careful not to list it way too low, because people will always try to lowball you. And so with lowballers, it's just part of the deal of selling stuff used. And what I personally do is I look up the average sale cost of the item in my area on Facebook Marketplace. So let's say the Xbox One that I sold recently, let's say it's averages between 150 and or 100 and 150, right? So you always want to list a little bit more than what the average sale cost in your area is. And that's just because people will always try to talk you down. So let's say Xbox One sells for 150. I'd list it for 165, right? And then you're going to get a message from somebody saying, would you take 150? And you'd be like, you know what? Sure, I'll consider it. And then get back to them and like, you know what? That sounds like a good deal, right? And what this does is gives the buyer the illusion that they're lowballing you and getting the price that they want. But in reality, you're getting the price that you want because you wanted 150 to begin with, but they don't know that. So just always list a little higher to try to deal with those lowballers, because no matter what Even if you say no lowballers, don't lowball me, you'll always get somebody who tries to talk you down. So if you list for a little bit higher than you want and somebody talks you down, they feel successful because they talked you down, but you're actually getting the amount of money you wanted in the first place. Another selling technique that I used if I needed to sell something speedy and fast, if I needed to just get it gone, what I would do is put in the caption and the title or whatever, I would say the word deal. I would list the item for, let's say, $50, but I actually wanted $25, and I'll say $25 off if you can get it by the end of the month. And that's vague enough where if they don't check how many weeks it's been listed, they'll say like, oh, if I pick it up by the end of the month, I can get $25 off this item. This person must really need it gone. That is a good deal. But you list it for, let's say, $150, you want $125, and you say $25 off if you come get it soon, they will have the illusion of, I need to go pick this up. This is a good deal. The deal will expire by the end of the month, which in reality it won't, but they don't think about that. They see deal, they see $25 off, and it makes them more likely to act on impulse and buy the thing even if they don't really need it. So that's another technique that I've used, and it has worked to get rid of big items like couches and furniture, things that I don't want to personally deliver and ship because I don't have a truck, so I literally can't. And I say, $50 off if you come get it by the end of the week. And somebody basically always shows up with a truck ready to load it up and get it gone. So that is another great tactic you can use if you want to sell something fast. Now, with all of the selling tactics out of the way, let's talk about the actual listing of the item on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist, wherever else. One thing you want to do is try to provide as much information as you possibly can in the description and in the photos of the items so you're not bombarded with questions about the device. I find it really annoying when I list something and I tell what it can do and I get a question like, can this item do this? And it's literally in the description. Like I just got a message from somebody on Facebook Marketplace. I'm selling my old monitor that broke, but I'm selling it for a heavily discounted price. Like that monitor usually sells for $800 new, $400 used. I'm selling it for $100, and I have in the description, the panel's messed up and it only comes with the monitor, not the power supply. And I got a question from this one person asking, does everything work? And my response is, did you read the description? So you want to try to have as much information as you can in the description of the item that tells the condition of it and all of that stuff. And then in the pictures, you want to make the item look as clean and as presentable as possible. Like with that Xbox that I found in the garbage, if I would have just plugged it in and listed it as it was, probably would not have sold for the $150 that it did. So what matters is whether or not you clean it up and make it look presentable. So I took the time, I cleaned it up, I opened it up, I dusted it out, and I took some pretty good pictures of it. And that's just what makes your listing stand out, whether or not the pictures look good. So if you have a really crappy picture of the item and you only have 2 pictures and they don't really show much at all of the item's condition or whether or not it works, you're probably not going to sell it. So try to take good pictures of it. And something else that helps is just taking a screenshot of the price of the item new on Amazon so they can get a sense of, if I was to buy this new, it would be $500, but this guy's selling it for $250. That's half off. That's a pretty good deal. And, the benefit of Facebook Marketplace is, there's not taxes on the transactions. You just get raw cash for what you sell. So you can be like, this item's $480 on Amazon, but after tax is pretty close to $500. I'm selling for $250. That's about half off after tax, right? Because there's no tax on the transaction when you sell it just person to person. So that is something that you should consider. So presentation is very important because if your item only has 2 very blurry and out of focus pictures of it, nobody's going to buy it. But if it has, 8 really high quality pictures showing that everything works, that item would sell faster than an item with just some crappy pictures with a very vague description. So you want to be as informative as you can with the listing so people don't bombard you with questions, and you can just make the item look as presentable as you can, and it will sell faster than somebody who just takes crappy pictures and doesn't even add a description. So one thing that's really important, regardless of if you're buying or selling, is your safety. And if you are selling a big budget item, what really matters is whether or not you think this person is going to try to steal it from you, whether you think they're going to show up with not enough cash. People sometimes do get violent and annoyed if you try to buy something from them and you see the product and you're not happy with it. They will try to be confrontational. So one thing that really is important is your personal safety. So whenever I sell a big price item like a computer or like a TV or something like that, I say to meet at a police station. Now, if the person had malicious intent and they were going to try to rob you and take your stuff, they will not meet you at a police station. So police stations are safe areas where you can meet to complete transactions. There's cameras everywhere, and there's probably going to be police officers on site, so you don't have to worry about getting robbed or getting mugged or whatever else, right? Because that kind of thing does happen. So if you are selling an item that you think is worth stealing, and somebody probably would steal from you, tell them to meet you at a police station, and if they back out, they were probably planning on stealing it from you. So that is just something you have to consider. And then something else I will say is just be careful. If you're on Facebook Marketplace, chances are their commerce profile is linked to their personal account. So just go scroll through their personal account and just kind of get a vague idea of the kind of person they are, right? Because if they're posting pictures with drugs, alcohol, and guns and stuff like that, you might not want to let that person into your home. And I'm not saying that it's like a profiling thing. It's just as simple as you want to be safe. And you do not want to let a person with a criminal record into your home if you have a baby sleeping in the next room, right? It's just the reality of the situation. You don't want to get hurt. You don't want to get stolen from. You want to have the transaction completed as smoothly as possible. So you can probably look at their profile through their commerce profile on Facebook Marketplace and determine whether or not you think this person is somebody who you should let into your home. And it's basically just up to your judgment. And I do this with every single person who I'm going to meet with on Facebook Marketplace who's going to come into my apartment to buy something, because I don't want to let somebody in who has, potentially malicious intent. It's basically just down to your safety. So you should try to contact them and say to meet them at a police station if you're selling something expensive. If they say hell no, or if they say, why can't we meet at this shady place instead? They're probably trying to steal from you. And I personally have not experienced anything like that yet. I'm going to knock on some serious wood here, but it does happen. So just keep yourself safe. And maybe if you're meeting somewhere that seems kind of sketchy, bring a friend or a family member with you so you're not just there alone in an area you're not familiar with if the worst was to ever happen, right? So personally, I haven't dealt with this, but I have heard stories about it. So your safety is very important. So just don't do anything stupid. Look up the people that you're going to meet with through their Facebook commerce profiles and just, make good judgment calls. So before we talk about buying stuff on Facebook Marketplace, I just want to talk about refunds, because as the person selling the used stuff, it is up to you and your judgment call to decide whether or not you think a refund is going to be legitimate. And so I have two situations I want to talk about, one on Facebook Marketplace that happened locally, and then one with Reverb, which is basically just eBay for music equipment, that happened with shipping something from Texas to New York City. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about the Reverb situation first. So with the Reverb situation, what happened was the amplifier did not have much of its original packaging, but it still had its box. So I bubble wrapped it, put it in its box, and then got some foam to put around that, and then put that in a second box, printed the label, put the label on the box, and then sent it to UPS, where they, took care of everything from there and got it shipped out to the customer. Now, I hear back from the customer in about a week, and they say that it arrived damaged and broken, and they were mad at me. For some reason, I am at fault for there being footprints and shoe marks on the box, and the box was caved in and the amplifier was broken. And so basically what happened is that UPS broke it in shipping, and it was a $2,500 amp with about $50 shipping fee plus an additional $100-ish for package protection. And he forgot he had the package protection and was yelling at me to refund him. And I understand the frustration he would have felt if he didn't have the packaging protection. But I reached out to him. I'm like, hey, dude, you're yelling at me for something that's not my fault, one. And two, you have package protection. So contact UPS, put in a claim, and we should be fine. And so he put that claim in, and then, he got his money back, and I got to keep the money he sent because we had package insurance. And so with a situation like that, unfortunately, I would not have taken the refund, which would have pissed him off, but it's not my fault that UPS broke the item. I had it bubble wrapped in a box with foam padding in another box, and they decided it was a good idea, which, by the way, there were fragile stickers on this too, and UPS thought it was a good idea to step on it, and they broke it. So I would have understood the customer's frustration if it was broken, but it would not have been my fault. And, I've seen situations where something like this occurs, and then the customer leaves a 1-star review on the seller's profile when it was not the seller's fault at all. So you just have to make those judgment calls. And the judgment call that I would have made if he did not have the package protection is, sorry, I shipped it to you functional and it arrived to you broken. I packaged it thoroughly. Unfortunately, that's not my fault. So situations like this do happen, which is why when you do ship something super expensive, you have to get the package insurance, because I would rather be out, $100 than $2,500. So that is the situation that happened with refunds on Reverb. And if the package insurance wasn't there, I just, unfortunately for that customer, I would not have accepted that refund, because that's just not fair to me, because the incident was not my fault. So the situation with Facebook was a little different. So I met this person locally, and I met them at a Starbucks, because I never meet somebody in my house unless it's an item that like I can't physically pick up and move, like a couch or something, right? And so I met this person at a Starbucks. They bought an RTX 2070 for me, and I sold it to them in perfect working condition. And, we completed the transaction. I think I sold it to them for like $300. They took it back to their place. And then, it was all fine and dandy for about 3 weeks. And then I hear back from them saying that the graphics card bricked and they want their money back. And I told them, well, no, because it's not really my fault the card bricked. I thoroughly tested it before selling it to you. What happened? And he's just like, well, I was playing a game and then it just completely shut off and it won't turn back on. So I told him to send me the specs of the rest of his computer, and he had a power supply that did not meet the minimum requirements to run an RTX 2070. So basically, he fried the card and wanted his money back. He made the mistake. It wasn't me. And he was astronomically pissed off at me. Like, I'm talking yelling, cussing, sending voice notes, sending screenshots of like where we met, saying he'll find me. But I didn't meet this guy at my house, so he had no idea where I lived. And so this is why it's important to meet somebody in public, because if I would have met that guy at my apartment and he was this genuinely pissed off and threatening to hurt me, he would have known exactly where to go. So it's just important to meet in public places like Starbucks or at police stations or whatever. And, with this situation, I did not accept the refund because he broke it. And I had to explain to him, like, dude, it's not my fault the card didn't work. You didn't have a power supply strong enough to handle the card, and that's why it broke. And his response is like, but it worked for a little bit. I'm like, yeah, but then it broke. So it's just the unfortunate situation with stuff like this. Like, if you're buying a graphics card, make sure you have the knowledge on whether or not your computer is capable of using that graphics card. So I felt bad for him because he was out $300, but I'm not going to take back a broken graphics card, right? If he just wanted to return it because he didn't want it and everything worked, sure, but it didn't. It broke. So that's just unfortunate for him. And I do feel bad about it, but at the same time, it's not my fault. So now let's go ahead and talk about buying stuff. And I'm going to use a personal experience that I have of buying a computer that had everything in it but the graphics card. So what me and my friends did is we met this person out of Starbucks, and we actually brought a graphics card with us to plug into the system just to verify everything worked. So, we went inside of the Starbucks. There were other people there. We brought a little screen, an HDMI cord, and power cord, plugged it all in, put the graphics card in the computer, flipped the power supply on, turned the system on, and everything worked, right? But we had no way of testing it to see whether or not it worked if we would have just shown up and picked it up, right? And so when you're buying stuff that's pretty pricey and it's technology, make sure you can meet in a scenario where you can test it to make sure it works. Because, unfortunately, as I've said a couple other times in this video, people can be pretty shitty sometimes. And so you just want to be sure that you're not getting ripped off and you're buying something that does actually work as advertised. So always make sure you can meet somewhere like a Starbucks where it has outlets on the inside and it's a public space, and you can plug in, like if you're buying a laptop, you can plug it in and test it out before you leave to make sure you're not going to get ripped off. So now let's say you arrive, you take a look at the item and it's not in the condition that it was advertised in. Let's say it was advertised on Facebook Marketplace as used like new, but it's covered in scratches and physical imperfections. And there's a little bit of, a couple dead pixels on the screen or whatever else it might be. That is when I believe it's personally okay to lowball. I don't like to lowball before seeing the item. I like to lowball once I get there and see it's not as advertised. So if that happens, you might want to politely say like, hey man, I noticed you listed the listing as used like new, but I see a bunch of scratches that you didn't even take pictures of when you posted the listing. I'm not going to be able to give you the full price you're asking for because this thing is not as advertised. I could give you like, let's say $20 off, and then I'll take it right now and I'll give you the cash. And there's a chance they might get a little hostile. And if they do, just say, you know what? I'm sorry, man, this isn't going to work out, and just leave. And this is why you meet in public places, because nobody's going to like clock you in the middle of a Starbucks. Well, probably not. There are some crazy people out there, but you should be respectful with it, right? And you shouldn't try to be mean to the person. Like, this is not at all how it's advertised, dude. This is gross. Like, just be like, hey man, this doesn't look like the advertisement. You said it was in perfect condition. There were scratches all over it. I'm a little disappointed by the inaccuracies. I'll take it just for like 20 bucks off. Just try to be respectful about it. Don't be a dick. But I've had situations where I've gone to look at a guitar and the guitar was advertised to have no physical imperfections. And then I get there and I look at it and the back is all scratched up, but there wasn't any pictures of the back of the guitar on the listing. And they did that intentionally. So I wasted an hour of my time driving to and from this place and I didn't even buy the thing. So, you have to be accurate with your pictures when you're selling, and then you have to be respectful if the pictures aren't accurate and you do want to buy it when you try to lowball them, because people do get defensive and people do get frustrated when you go to buy something for $100 and then you try to knock them down to 80. They will be a little upset. So just be calm and collected and explain your reasoning, and they have the right to refuse, and you also have the right to refuse. So just walk away, and I'm sure you'll find the item somewhere else. So the last thing that I'm going to say here is communicate clearly. If you're not going to be able to make it to a sale, let the buyer know. And the reason I'm holding this right here is this is a guitar that I bought on Facebook Marketplace. And when I initially reached out to the first person to buy it from, they said they wanted to meet me at this place that was like an hour away from where I lived. But I really wanted this guitar. So I said, sure, I'll meet you there. I get there, he doesn't show up, he blocks me on everything, and I don't hear from him ever again. Turns out he had sold the guitar to somebody earlier that day, forgot he said he was going to sell it to me, and maybe he felt guilty or something, I don't know. But he blocked me on everything and didn't tell me he wasn't going to be there, so I wasted 2 hours of my time driving to and from this place for no reason. And then I ended up finding another one, and this is left-handed because I am a lefty, but I ended up finding another one in a closer area for only 50 bucks more, and I actually managed to get this one. So it's a PRS SE24. I think it's like Blue Burst is the name of the color scheme, but it's a nice guitar. But my point here is, if you're not going to be able to make it to complete a transaction, let the other person know. Don't just not show up and have them show up and you just wasted their time, right? And then the last thing I'll say here is, if you're done selling an item, if you've completed the transaction, take it off of the marketplace, delist it from eBay, remove the item, because I reached out to somebody recently that had a desk for sale that I was interested in purchasing because I'm looking for new desks. And they basically just said, no, this sold 3 weeks ago. Why is the listing still up? So just be on top of everything, communicate clearly, and consider the other things that I said in this video, and you should have a pretty smooth experience buying and selling stuff on the used market. So I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, let me know down below. This was a very different kind of video from what I usually make, but a couple of you thought this would have been cool to make, and so here I am making it. So let me know if you have any questions down below. My name is Release Radar, and I'll catch you guys in the next video of whatever I make. Peace.